The city buzzed with life, a cacophony of car horns, distant sirens, and hurried footsteps. Amid the chaos, Albus sat in his sleek, minimalist apartment, bathed in the cold glow of his computer screens. His fingers danced across the keyboard as he crafted another viral post. He was a king in the digital world, his words shaping opinions, sparking debates, and fueling movements. Yet, deep down, a hollow ache gnawed at him, a whisper he couldn't quite silence. Is this all there is? Across town, Roja stood in the middle of a crowded subway platform. Her military jacket hung loosely on her shoulders, a reminder of battles fought long ago. The noise of the crowd pressed against her like an invisible weight. She clenched her fists, trying to steady her breath as flashes of memory, smoke, fire, screams, invaded her mind. She had survived wars abroad only to fight an endless one within herself. In the financial district, Knox adjusted his tie as he strode through the marble lobby of a towering skyscraper. His reflection stared back at him from polished surfaces. Sharp suit, confident smirk, but it was all a facade. His life revolved around numbers and deals, yet every night he lay awake, haunted by the emptiness of his success. He had everything money could buy but couldn't shake the feeling that he was starving for something he couldn't name. And in a quiet lab on the outskirts of the city, Paulida worked late into the night. The hum of machines and the sterile smell of chemicals were her constant companions. She was close, so close, to a breakthrough that could redefine human longevity. Yet every time she looked at her reflection in the glass vials, she saw not triumph, but fear. Fear of time slipping through her fingers. Fear that no discovery could ever truly conquer death. For lives moving in parallel, oblivious to one another, yet bound by an invisible thread. That night, each of them experienced something they couldn't explain. Albus woke to find his screens flickering with strange symbols, ancient glyphs that seemed to pulse with life. His hands trembled as he reached out to touch them, and for a brief moment, he felt as though he were being pulled into another realm. Roja's dreams were filled with fire and blood, but this time there was something new. A figure cloaked in red standing amidst the chaos, holding out a hand as if beckoning her forward. When she woke up drenched in sweat, she could still hear their voice echoing in her mind. You are more than your pain. Knox's penthouse was silent, except for the faint hum of the city below. Yet, as he poured himself another glass of whiskey, he saw shadows move where there should have been none. A voice whispered from the darkness. What you hoard will one day weigh you down. In her lab, Paulida's experiments took an unexpected turn. The cells she'd been studying began to behave erratically under the microscope, splitting and reforming in ways that defied logic. She leaned closer only to hear a faint murmur that seemed to come from within her own mind. Even eternity has its price. By morning, all four were shaken but dismissed their experiences as stress or coincidence. That is until they each received an identical message. The time has come to awaken. The words appeared on Albus's screens, scrawled across Roja's notebook without her remembering writing them, whispered through Knox's office intercom though no one else was there, and printed on Paulida's lab reports despite no record of it being entered. Each message was followed by coordinates, a location none of them recognized, but felt inexplicably drawn to. Later that evening, they arrived one by one at an abandoned church on the outskirts of town. The air was thick with anticipation as they stepped inside and saw each other for the first time. Who are you? Roja demanded, her voice sharp but tinged with unease. I could ask you the same, Knox replied coolly. Albus stayed silent, his eyes darting between them while Paulida studied their faces with scientific curiosity. Before anyone could say more, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man draped in robes that seemed to shimmer between light and darkness. His presence was both calming and unsettling. You felt it, he said simply. The pull towards something greater. Who are you? Albus finally asked. I am merely a guide, the man replied. And you are more important than you realize. The four exchanged uneasy glances before Roja crossed her arms defiantly. Important for what? To fulfill your purpose, The man said with a faint smile, "To bring about not destruction, but transformation." The room fell silent as his words hung heavy in the air. "You are the Four Horsemen," he continued softly, "but not as you've been told. Not harbingers of doom, but catalysts for awakening." Their disbelief was palpable, but deep down each of them felt something stir, a recognition they couldn't explain. And so began their journey into a truth far greater than any of them had imagined. The revelation left the four stunned, their minds reeling with questions and disbelief. The enigmatic guide, who introduced himself simply as Mentor, explained that their true identities had been hidden from them, waiting for the right moment to awaken. "But why us?" Albus asked, his usual confidence shaken. Mentor's eyes seemed to look through them rather than at them. "You were chosen because you embody both the challenges and the potential of humanity. Your journey will not only transform you, but ripple out to affect the world." He turned to each of them in turn. "Albus, you represent the white horse of conquest. But your conquest is not of lands or people, but of truth itself. You must learn to distinguish reality from illusion." Albus felt a weight settle on his shoulders. His entire career was built on crafting compelling narratives, regardless of their veracity. The thought of seeking absolute truth terrified him. "Roha," Mentor continued, "you are the red horse of war. But the war you must wage is not against others, but against the conflict within yourself. Find inner peace, and you'll show others the way." Roha's fists clenched involuntarily. Peace seemed like a foreign concept after years of battle, both on the field and in her mind. Mentor's gaze fell on Nox. "The black horse of famine is yours to ride. But the hunger you represent is not physical. It's the spiritual emptiness that plagues our world. You must learn the true nature of abundance." Nox scoffed, but his bravado couldn't mask the unease in his eyes. Everything he valued was suddenly being called into question. Finally, Mentor addressed Paulida. "You, my dear, are the pale horse of death. But death is not an end, it's a transformation. Your task is to understand the cycle of life and rebirth." Pallida's scientific mind rebelled against such mystical concepts, yet she couldn't deny the strange events that had led her here. "Your challenges," Mentor explained, "will force you to confront the very essence of who you are. Only by overcoming them can you fulfill your true purpose." As if on cue, the world around them began to shift and blur. The abandoned church faded away, replaced by vivid, personalized landscapes for each of them. Albus found himself in a labyrinth of screens and mirrors, each reflecting a different version of reality. Voices whispered conflicting information from all sides. "Find the truth," Mentor's voice echoed, "beneath the layers of deception, including your own." Roha stood on a battlefield, but instead of enemy soldiers, she faced shadowy versions of herself, each representing a different trauma or fear she'd been carrying. "Make peace with your past." Mentor's words drifted on the wind to create a new future. Nox was thrust into a world of poverty and need. His expensive suit was replaced by tattered clothes, his pockets empty. All around him, people struggled with hunger and desperation. "Learn the value of what truly sustains the soul," Mentor's voice resonated in his mind. Paulida found herself in a strange realm where time seemed fluid. She watched as living things aged, died, and were reborn in an endless cycle. "Embrace the natural order," Mentor's whisper came from everywhere and nowhere, "and discover the beauty in impermanence." As they faced their individual trials, each of them began to realize the magnitude of their roles. They weren't just changing themselves. Their actions and choices were sending ripples through the fabric of reality itself. Albus, in his quest for truth, found that every lie he uncovered in the labyrinth caused a physical change in the world around him. Walls crumbled, revealing new paths and possibilities. Roha's battles with her inner demons manifested as literal changes in the landscape. As she found moments of peace, flowers bloomed on the battlefield, and the sky cleared of smoke. Nox discovered that true wealth came not from hoarding, but from sharing. Each act of generosity, in his impoverished world caused resources to multiply miraculously. And Paulida, as she learned to accept the natural cycle of life and death, found she could guide souls gently through their transitions, easing suffering and bringing comfort. Yet with each small victory came greater challenges. The four found themselves tested in ways they never imagined possible. Their beliefs, their values, their very identities were constantly challenged and reshaped. As days blurred into weeks in these strange realms, they began to understand that their journey was far from over. The transformations they were undergoing were just the beginning. In quiet moments, they could feel the weight of the world's expectations on their shoulders. Somewhere out there, humanity was facing crises that only they could address, but only if they could first conquer the battles raging within themselves. The question that burned in each of their minds was, would they be ready in time? As their individual trials intensified, the four began to experience moments of unexpected connection. In flashes of insight, they caught glimpses of each other's struggles, forming an unspoken bond that transcended their separate realities. Albus, deep in his maze of illusions, suddenly saw through Roja's eyes as she faced down a particularly vicious manifestation of her guilt. Without thinking, he called out, "It's not real. You're stronger than your past." His words, imbued with newfound clarity, cut through Roja's vision like a blade of light. Roja, bolstered by this unseen support, found the strength to stand firm against her demons. As she did, a wave of calm washed over her, briefly connecting her to Nox's world of scarcity. She felt his desperation and instinctively shared her hard-won inner peace, whispering, "True wealth comes from within." Nox, touched by this unexpected serenity, looked at his barren surroundings with new eyes. He noticed a withering plant and, for the first time, felt compelled to nurture rather than exploit. As he tended to it, he inadvertently tapped into Pallida's realm, experiencing a profound sense of life's cyclical nature. Paulida, sensing Nox's awakening to life's fragility, found herself able to see beyond death's finality. In that moment, she perceived Albus's struggle with truth and called out, "Look beyond appearances." The essence of truth lies in interconnection. These moments of convergence grew more frequent and intense, weaving their separate journeys into a tapestry of shared transformation. They began to understand that their individual growth was inextricably linked to each other's and to the fate of the world they had left behind. As their awareness expanded, so did the scope of their challenges. They found themselves confronting not just personal demons, but collective shadows that loomed over humanity. Albus faced a tidal wave of misinformation that threatened to drown out all truth. He stood at the edge of a digital abyss, watching as lies mutated and spread like a virus. Drawing on his newfound discernment, he began to weave a network of truth, each authentic connection forming a lifeline in the chaos. Roja discovered that her inner battlefield was connected to every conflict zone on Earth. Each time she made peace with a part of herself, she felt a ripple of ceasefire echo across the world. But the forces of discord were strong, constantly threatening to reignite old hatreds. Nox's realm of scarcity expanded to encompass global economic systems. He saw how greed and fear created artificial shortages amidst plenty. With each act of genuine sharing, he witnessed supply chains healing and resources flowing to where they were most needed. Paulida found herself navigating not just individual life cycles, but the very pulse of the planet. She sensed the Earth's fever rising, ecosystems struggling to maintain balance. Her growing understanding of natural rhythms allowed her to guide these systems towards harmony, but the task seemed overwhelming. As they grappled with these monumental challenges, they began to feel the urgency of their mission. The world they had left behind was approaching a critical juncture, a moment of potential awakening or deeper sleep. In a rare moment of direct communication, Mentor's voice reached all four simultaneously. The time has come to bring your gifts together. The world stands at a crossroads, and only united can you guide humanity towards transformation. With these words, The barriers between their realms began to dissolve. They found themselves standing together in a liminal space, a nexus point between worlds. Here, they could see the Earth as it truly was, a living, breathing entity pulsing with potential and peril. Albus, his eyes clear and focused, said, "I see it now. The truth we need to share isn't just facts. It's the reality of our interconnection." Rohan nodded, a calm strength emanating from her. "And the peace we must create starts within, but doesn't end there. It's about harmonizing all conflicts, inner and outer." Knox, his former arrogance replaced by humble wisdom, added, "True abundance comes from recognizing that we're all part of the same ecosystem. What harms one, harms all." Paulina, her gaze both compassionate and unflinching, concluded, "And we must help humanity understand that change, even painful change, is part of a larger cycle of renewal." As they stood united, they felt a surge of power unlike anything they had experienced before. They were no longer just individuals on separate quests. They had become a force of conscious evolution. But even as they recognized their collective strength, they saw the immense challenge that lay ahead. The Earth hung in the balance, teetering between breakthrough and breakdown. Mentor's voice echoed one last time, "You have awakened to your true selves. Now you must awaken the world." The real test begins. With shared resolve, the Four Horsemen prepared to ride forth, not as harbingers of doom, but as catalysts of transformation. The fate of humanity rested in their hands. The Four Horsemen stood at the precipice of reality, their newfound unity pulsing with potential. As they gazed upon the world they had left behind, they saw a planet in crisis, ecological systems on the brink of collapse, societies fractured by fear and mistrust, and a collective human consciousness clouded by confusion and despair. "It's worse than we thought," Albus murmured, his eyes scanning the intricate web of global information networks, now visible to him as streams of light and shadow. Rohan nodded grimly. "The conflicts run deeper than any of us realized. It's not just nations at war, but people at war with themselves and nature." Knox's gaze was fixed on the flow of resources across the globe. The imbalance is staggering. Abundance and scarcity existing side by side, separated only by artificial barriers. Pallada's voice was soft but certain, and the cycle of life and death is out of sync. The natural rhythms that sustain the planet are faltering. They knew that their return to the world would not be a triumphant ride of conquest, but a delicate mission of awakening. They had to act, but with wisdom and compassion. "We can't force change," Albus realized aloud. "We have to inspire it." With a shared nod of understanding, they stepped back into the world, their presence rippling across the fabric of reality. Albus found himself in the heart of a massive social media company. As he walked through the gleaming offices, he could see the tangled webs of information that connected millions of minds. With a gentle touch, he began to adjust the algorithms, not to control, but to illuminate. Slowly, feeds began to show not just what people wanted to see, but what they needed to see. Glimpses of truth that sparked curiosity and connection. Roha appeared in a war-torn city, where tensions between factions were at a breaking point. As she moved through the streets, her inner peace radiated outward. Soldiers and civilians alike found themselves pausing, memories of shared humanity bubbling to the surface. In a moment that would later be called miraculous, lifelong enemies lowered their weapons and began to talk. Knox materialized in the boardroom of a multinational corporation. As executives discussed profit margins, he infused the air with a new perspective. Suddenly, talks of sustainability and ethical practices didn't seem like obligations, but opportunities. Ideas for sharing resources and uplifting communities began to flow, reshaping the very notion of success. Paulina found herself in a hospital, moving unseen through emergency rooms and hospice care. Her presence brought a profound sense of acceptance to those facing death, and a spark of renewed purpose to those clinging to life. The boundary between ending and beginning blurred, revealing the continuous flow of existence. As each horseman worked in their domain, they remained connected, their actions synchronizing in a dance of transformation. A truth revealed by Albus would inspire a peace talk guided by Roja, leading to a resource-sharing initiative sparked by Nox, ultimately nurturing the renewal that Paulida shepherded. Their influence spread like ripples in a pond, touching lives across the globe. A farmer in India discovered a sustainable practice that revitalized the soil. A scientist in Brazil had a breakthrough in clean energy technology. A teacher in Nigeria developed a curriculum that fostered empathy and global citizenship. But the changes weren't without resistance. Those invested in the old ways of thinking fought back. Corporations tried to suppress the new algorithms. War profiteers attempted to reignite conflicts. Economic powers sought to maintain imbalances. And those who feared death tried desperately to cling to the illusion of permanence. The Four Horsemen found their resolve tested. For every mind they opened, another seemed to close. For every conflict resolved, a new one threatened to emerge. The weight of their task was immense, and at times, it seemed impossible. In a moment of doubt, they reconvened in the liminal space between worlds. "Are we making a difference?" Roja asked, her voice tinged with weariness. Albus smiled softly. "Look closer. The changes may seem small, but they're taking root." Nox nodded in agreement. "I can feel it. The flow of resources is shifting, becoming more equitable. And the rhythms of life are starting to harmonize," Paulida added. "It's subtle, but it's happening." As they spoke, they became aware of a new presence, countless pinpricks of light surrounding them. They realized these were the awakened consciousness of every person they had touched, joining them in their effort. Mentor's voice echoed around them one last time. "You are not alone. The awakening has begun. Trust in the process and in yourselves." Renewed and reinvigorated, the Four Horsemen prepared to return to their task. The transformation of the world was not a single event, but an ongoing journey. And they were ready to guide humanity every step of the way. As they dispersed once more, they carried with them the knowledge that true change comes not from conquest, but from awakening the potential that lies within every heart and mind. The apocalypse they heralded was not an end, but a new beginning. And so they rode forth, not with the thunder of hooves, but with the quiet power of awakened spirits, leading humanity towards a future bright with possibility. As weeks turned into months, the subtle changes initiated by the Four Horsemen began to take more tangible form. The world was far from perfect, but a new consciousness was undeniably emerging. Albus, continuing his work in the realm of information, watched as truth became the new currency of the digital age. Viral misinformation still existed, but it was increasingly challenged by a global network of critical thinkers. He smiled as he saw children in classrooms across the world being taught not just what to think, but how to think. The seeds of discernment are sprouting, he mused, his eyes gleaming with the reflection of 1,000,000 awakening minds. Roja found herself drawn to global hotspots, not as a soldier, but as a peacemaker. Her presence seemed to calm even the most heated conflicts. In a moment that would be etched in history, she stood between two warring factions, her silence more powerful than any weapon. As the fighters looked into her eyes, they saw reflections of their own humanity. "The war within can end," she whispered, her words carrying on the wind. "And with it, the wars without." Nox, once driven by greed, now moved through the world's financial centers with a mission of balance. He inspired a new economic model that valued sustainability and shared prosperity. Companies began competing not to accumulate wealth, but to create the most positive impact. True wealth, he declared to a room full of former rivals, now partners, is measured by what we give, not what we take. Paulida's work was perhaps the most profound yet subtle. As humanity's relationship with death transformed, so did its approach to life. Hospices became places of celebration and transition. Birth and death were increasingly seen not as opposites, but as different points on the same sacred cycle. In embracing the full spectrum of existence, she said to a gathering of spiritual leaders from diverse traditions, "We find the key to living fully." As the Four Horsemen continued their work, they noticed a change in the very fabric of reality. The boundaries between their individual domains began to blur. Albus's quest for truth naturally led to Roja's peace. Nox's economic reforms created a foundation for Pallada's spiritual transformations. Their once separate missions had become a unified force for global awakening. But just as dawn was breaking on this new era, a final challenge emerged. A coalition of those resistant to change, hardliners, extremists, and those profiting from the old ways, launched a coordinated effort to reverse the progress. They used every tool at their disposal: media manipulation, economic pressure, and even the threat of violence. The Four Horsemen felt the weight of this resistance acutely. For a moment, it seemed as if all their work might be undone. In this darkest hour, they gathered once more in the liminal space between worlds. But this time, they were not alone. The countless pinpricks of light they had seen before had grown into a vast, shimmering network of awakened souls from every corner of the globe. Mentor's voice, now seeming to come from within each of them, spoke. "You have done well, but your greatest test is at hand. The old world will not go quietly. Now is the time to fully embrace your roles, not as separate entities, but as a unified force of transformation." Understanding dawned on them. They were no longer four individuals, but facets of a greater whole. As this realization settled, their forms began to merge, coalescing into a being of pure light and potential. This unified consciousness returned to the world at the moment of crisis. Its presence was felt in every heart and mind open to change. People who had been sitting on the fence of progress suddenly found the courage to stand up for what they believed in. Those who had been working in isolation discovered they were part of a global movement. The coalition of resistance found its efforts thwarted not by force, but by an overwhelming wave of collective awakening. Their manipulations were exposed by a populace newly adept at discerning truth. Their economic pressures crumbled against a system built on shared prosperity. And their threats of violence were met with a peace so profound it disarmed them from within. As the dust settled, the world found itself irrevocably changed. The transformation was not a utopia. Challenges remained, and the journey was ongoing. But a fundamental shift had occurred in the human spirit. The being of light, its mission complete, began to dissipate. As it did, Albus, Roja, Nox, and Paulida found themselves once again in individual form, standing on a hilltop overlooking a city bustling with renewed purpose. "It's beautiful," Albus said, his eyes misting with emotion. Roja nodded, a serene smile on her face. "Not perfect, but full of possibility. A world where everyone can thrive," Nox added, his voice filled with wonder. Paulida looked at each of them in turn. And this is just the beginning. As the sun rose on this new era, the Four Horsemen knew their work was far from over. But now they understood that their true power lay not in riding forth as harbingers of change, but in awakening the potential for transformation that existed within every soul. They had not ended the world. They had midwifed the birth of a new one. And as they stepped forward to continue their journey, they carried with them the knowledge that the greatest apocalypse is not one of destruction, but of revelation, the unveiling of humanity's true, limitless potential.